Okay, now let's tackle Part C. And Part C says, required earnings is defined as the amount that is just enough to meet fixed charges. And by fixed charges, they mean debenture interest and or preferred dividends. What are the required pre-tax earnings before and after the recapitalization? Okay, well, if you look on the screen here, just to the left of my mouse, the fixed charges would consist of the dividends on the $6 preferred and the dividends on the $10.50 preferred, and this is before the recapitalization. So if we add that together, we get 7.2 plus 0.6 equals 7.8. Okay, so I'm going to just do that long and slow way. 7.2 plus 0.6. This is in millions of dollars. But then we would need to divide that by the tax rate, which is 50%, right, to come up with what it would take in terms of pre-tax earnings before the recapitalization. So let me slide this over and we'll just label this. This is the required pre-tax earnings. And we're defining required pre-tax earnings as enough to meet the fixed charges. Okay. And this is before recapitalization. I'll just abbreviate it. Now, I'm going to change it and do it after the recapitalization. Okay, but I think what I'll do is copy this over and then we'll flip to the other sheet and drop those in, see if we can work on it here. Now what I'm going to do is just move this over here. The reason why I want to work down here is because we have the information in front of us. So now using the same formula, I no longer have the 7.2 and 0.6 as my fixed costs. All I have are in terms of those fixed costs that need to be covered in terms of required pre-tax earnings would be the dividends on the 240. So this becomes equal to the 2.9, right? And what I think I'll just do is point to that cell. So we get 2.9 divided by 50%. And so what we see is in the second case, the required pre-tax earnings after recapitalization rounds to 5.8. Let me sort of make that round. So we drop from 15.6 to 5.8. And that would be the required earnings. And so we have a pretty substantial decrease as a result of the reorganization, leaving, in theory, that would leave the company in much better shape as a result of the reorganization. All right, let's jump back and take a look at D, because we've now answered C. Okay, how is the debt ratio affected by the reorganization? And if you were a holder of Bruget's common stock, would you vote in favor of the reorganization? Okay, so let's go figure out what the debt ratio is before the reorganization. If we slide up, we'll see that our total debt was equal to, what do we have? 336 less the common and retained earnings. So if I work that off to the side, that's 336 less 9 less 57, right? And that should come up with 270 of debt. But we've also got some preferred we need to back out because that's not considered debt either. So 336 less the 57 less the 9 less the 9 from the 1050 preferred and less the $6 preferred, which is 135. And that gets me 126. Now the reserves actually represent non-cash current liabilities that we've set up in the future. And I believe in terms of solving this problem, we would only consider current liabilities and advance payments is our debt. So I'm going to subtract out the 6 as well. That gets us down to 120. Now, the more simpler approach, we could have just taken the current liabilities of 42 and the 78, add that together, and we get 120. Okay, so I've got 120 of debt divided by total capitalization of 336, right? There's our 336 to the left of the mouse. So our debt ratio is 35.7. Now when we flip over to the other side and take a look at it, let's slide back up. We've got the same 120, the 42 plus the 78. So debt ratio after is again equal to 120, and divided by total capitalization in this case is 327. And we see that the debt ratio moved from 35.7%, but it changes. Oh, and one mistake here. We need to now add in the debentures. We're still considering the reserves outside of normal debt for purposes of this problem. And in my experience, I'd be more inclined to include it, though I can understand why some folks would treat these types of reserves as representing a not true debt obligation. Okay, so we're going to take in this case 120 plus our debentures, and that is equal to 90. So we'll take the 120 plus the 90. I'll put parentheses around that. Okay, so we can see where we're at. And now what we see is the debt ratio after jumps to 64.2%. Okay, so if we slide before, we were at 35.7%, and afterwards we're at 64.2%. Okay, and again, one thing to point out, advance payments by customers are counted as debt. So we're treating any advance payments that the customer made in anticipation of work we're going to do for them as debt, but we're not considering reserves as debt. Okay, then if preferred stock was treated as debt, the debt ratio actually declined slightly from about 78.6% to about 78%. But normally, preferred stock is treated as equity, even though it is a quasi-debt equity instrument. Okay, so the reorganization does turn out to be in the best interest of the shareholders, because under reorganization, we saw that earnings to the shareholders increased. The earnings required to cover fixed charges, including preferred dividends, decreased, and the income debentures are less risky to the shareholders than preferred stock. So for all of those reasons, the reorganization is in the best interest of the shareholders. Right, I just want to go back and show the debt ratio before was 34.7 and afterwards 64.2. And that wraps up this problem, everyone. Thank you.